Welcome to What Happens Next, the channel where we talk about and help you navigate the next chapter of your lives. If you're in your 50s, 60s, or beyond, and you're thinking about at a crossroads what you should do next in your life, this channel is designed to educate, inform, inspire, help you understand what options are available. Because for many of us, that conventional model of retirement uh, looks a little bit boring nowadays, and we want to live next chapters of our lives full of fun, excitement, enjoyment, invigoration, and everything in between. That's why I'm so pleased to have invited Jeremy onto the show. Jeremy, how you doing?
I'm fine, thanks, Chris. Really good to be here. Really good to be here.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this conversation. And you started before the interview of you talking to me a little bit about a big trip that you've got planned. Tell us a little bit about that.
Oh yeah, sure. Well, in the middle of this coming week, we go off. I do it every year. I go to Lourdes, and as part of a pilgrimage, we take 60 or so odd uh, in disabled people with us, and we have a team of nurses, doctors, and helpers. About 300 of us all together, and we spend a
Incredible.
week in Lourdes. Um, and as someone said to me the other day, they said, well, that's probably quite a relaxing weekend, isn't it? A week for you. And I said, not really. It's very tiring, very exhausting, work very hard. But we also party very hard as well. So,
Great stuff. Love that. How long
yeah.
have you done that for?
Well, I first did it in 1973, then took a bit of a break until 2014, I think it was.
Okay.
Yeah, and but I've been every year since then, apart from the COVID years, of course, when it didn't actually
Yeah, of
happen.
course, of course. So I know all about your work, and we've spoken about the amazing work you do. But for the benefit of our audience, tell us a little bit about you.
Um, so I, 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 I suppose the best way of describing is the journey that I've been on. I started off many years ago, flogging around the streets of London selling financial products. Then moved from there to financial advice, then to financial planning. Then I got more involved in the sort of relationship with money, so I started doing financial life planning, and then finally moved across to life coaching. And at that stage, I handed in my authorization to provide financial advice, and took a coaching course, and that's where I stand now as a professionally. Personally, it's been also, I think, a journey of from I started off living a life of fear, and really it was fear, and not really living the life I wanted to lead, and that changed quite dramatically. And now I regard myself as living a life of meaning, fulfillment, and wealth.
What changed? What was the? I mean, I'm assuming it was a journey of change.
It was,
Where you go,
yeah, that's right. I've always believed that there are two or three key points in your life when you come up with a decision and you go either left or right, and that decision is changes the complete direction of your life. And I always remember that one particular occasion when actually I first met a guy called George Kinder. I think you've already interviewed on this
yeah,
and that sticks in me. It was the 13th of July 2004, and I ended up at his first Seven Stages of Money Maturity workshop, and I was slightly reluctant to go. I have to say, I didn't really understand what was going on, but that was absolutely, it was one of those really life-changing moments, and I went off on a completely different tangent from there. And that's when I both my professional life and my personal life changed. So really, I always remember that date as being a very specific.
you
Uh,
know what's interesting about that for me, Jeremy? That element of sometimes these things that can alter our life fundamentally, we're reluctant to do initially.
Oh gosh, I entirely agree.
Mm.
And I think fear is obviously one of the things that has an effect on all our lives all the time.
I think you're right.
Um, but I think one of the great things you have to do is try and overcome that fear. And I always tell the story of jumping about a bit here, but when I published my first book, actually writing a book was dead easy. Well, I say dead easy. I mean, it
Yeah,
took three or four attempts to get it right. But the really difficult bit was pushing the button, the publish button, because actually at that stage you're going really public. You're going out
yeah,
into the world with your opinions, your views, and all the rest of it. And actually, I can't remember who told me, but someone once said to me that once you put your head above the parapet, someone will take a pot shot at you, and it that always happens, and you've just got
yeah.
to live with that and accept it. But I think what you also got to remember is that 90% of the people will be very
Be
happy with your
supportive.
views.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah. It's really interesting. There is an element of fear in terms of all of this, and what's really interesting is even though we've got a really decent audience who seem to like that stuff on what happens next, the next iteration of what happens next that we're building for the start of 2026, I'm really scared about. And it's that
yeah.
element of sort of, and this sounds too trite because I think it's probably more complicated than this, but feel the fear and do it anyway. And just make sure that you just like as you say you get to the point. It was really funny. I was having a conversation with somebody last week about um, how we can be more authentic financial planners. It was with another financial planner. How we can be
Yeah.
more authentic financial planners. And I believe, and again, I don't think this is particularly controversial, but I'd be interested in your opinion. I believe that sometimes as financial planners, we can be really we we can assume that we've got all the answers, and actually we need to just admit that we're human and we make mistakes. And I remember a couple of years ago when I wrote a book. I wrote a book a couple of years ago on kindness because I used to host
Yeah.
podcasts with my daughter, and I wrote a chapter, one of the first chapters on the book about being kinder to ourselves. And
Yeah.
I share a story in it where I took my dad away in 2019 to Gibraltar. So we went
Correct.
away to
Yeah.
Gibraltar and I booked a hotel, which was the Hotel Gibraltar, and flew into Gibraltar Airport 10 o'clock at night, got in a cab at the airport and said, "Can you take me to the Hotel Gibraltar?" And the cab driver went, "Definitely not." I was like, "Okay, why is that?" He went, "The Hotel Gibraltar is not actually in Gibraltar, it's in Spain." So I
Oh.
booked a hotel in the wrong country. And the reason that I mentioned that is because there was a real fear when we published the Kindness Project about sharing that story because
Yeah.
you're admitting that you're fallible as a human and you don't know what that's going to do with the relationships and trust you've built in your business and in your life. You know what? People get it. Do you know, people, as you say, people are the odd one will change their perception of you, but on the lion's share of people get that you're human and
Oh yeah.
connect
Yeah.
with that
Yeah. Yeah.
vulnerability.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It's so interesting. Now you mentioned that George Kinder was the first inflection point. What were the? You mentioned one or two others. What were the other ones?
Oh, I think going way, way, way back. Uh, it's when I spent 4 or 5 years in the army, and at one stage, I'm typical of the army. Couldn't really make a decision, and eventually my CEO turned around and said, yeah, because I was due to move on from the regiment, go elsewhere, and he just said, okay, entirely up to you. You can do either A or B. What do you want to do? And I, I think that led me to a completely different life story than if
Yeah,
I'd taken the other choice. So that was one I always remember. Another classic one, once again, goes back to days of my youth. Um, and I had a choice of going to university or joining the army. And it came down to that very narrow decision. Do I go to university? And in fact, I had an offer in those days from Exeter University to study environmental engineering. So
Okay.
obviously that was, but actually I took the other route and joined the army. And that too, I one of those real inflection points. And I think if I'd gone the other route, it would have been, my life would have been totally different. And
Yeah,
actually, I probably wouldn't be here now.
really, really interesting. So
Yeah.
tell us a bit, you've gone through this journey from financial advice, financial planning to financial life planning, now to life coaching. Tell me about the work you do today. So you're sitting down with a client. What does that look like in terms of the relationship and what you're helping them with?
It hasn't changed much from the work I did as a financial life planner, I have to say, except I suppose I have uh, downgraded, if you want, and you won't like this, but I've downgraded the financial side of things, only because what I started to realize was that people who I spoke to had more uh, challenges, if you want, than just their money. And
Yeah,
okay, back in the days of old, I would always talk to clients about money, but I didn't realize the full impact of what money meant to people. And I suppose I'm really following my own advice here. I've always had this mantra that money makes the world go round, and it does. But if you focus too much on money, then that's obviously, if money becomes the center of the universe, then that's obviously a very bad thing.
100%
Um,
agree. Yeah,
yeah. So to a certain extent, I've widened, if you want, my scope. Money is no longer. I deal with money with my clients, but it becomes much more about the other things that affect them,
yeah,
particularly when you are dealing with people who are professional people, independent people, who are coming up into that 45, 50, 60-year-old age bracket, and they are beginning to think about what do I do next. But also, I think there are at that age there are there are a lot of challenges that people come across, and even more so if you're an independent, self-employed professional, because you then you find yourself working a lot of time in that what I call a liminal space between work and home, and you have to make all these sort of decisions, and you don't have, maybe the support is not quite the right word, but you don't have the backup, if you want, of a big corporate firm to help you with those things. So you've got to make your own decisions about, about exiting your business, retiring, um, maybe, the kids have left home or leaving home. What about my house? Should I downsize, or stay with where I am? What about my relationships? So your relationship with your spouse in particular tends to change quite dramatically, because up to now it's almost so, looking after kids has been your job,
yeah.
and your spouse and you have done that, and
You
now
make
you suddenly, they are not there any longer. So what do you
yeah,
do?
you make a really interesting point actually, because I think from the research that I've read when I'm writing the What Happens Next book, actually earlier in our lives, purpose and meaning are often baked in because we're bringing up kids, right? And a lot of
Yeah, yeah,
their purpose and meaning comes from that, a job as mum and dad is to bring kids through.
yeah, yeah,
And I look at my own life and say, and I've still got Sophie at home at 13, but you turn around and go, now I know that Charlotte was 21, and she's off doing her own thing. Now she might come back, who knows, but she's off doing her own thing. There will be a point when our kids will be independent, and that's part of the job, right?
No, absolutely.
That's part of, you know, you made a really interesting point that we've never ever covered on what happens next. And I think you're right. It's unique to independent professionals in terms of that liminal space point you made. And the merge between home life and work life when there's no gap. So how do we get better at differentiating between the two?
I don't think you can differentiate between the two. I think to a certain extent you have, on the one hand, your business, on the other hand, you have your home life, but the two are inextricably linked. I think far more than if you're just a part of the corporate world and maybe employed by a business. And you do. It's not as though I'm being a bit sort of oversimplistic here, but you know, if you're in the corporate world, you to a certain extent you finish work at the end of the day or at the end of the weekend, and you go home, and the two tend to be quite separate. But when you're independent, when you're self-employed, it's much more. There's much more of a linkage between what you do, what you earn, and the way you live your life, and which is why I think it's so important to look at what I call that liminal space between work and home, because that's where all the challenges actually tend to come about.
It's quite interesting as well when you work with your partner, because my wife is my ops director at Savello. And like that question where I'll like at 9:30 at night, I'll come back from battle tennis and go, did we do that thing for a client? And she'll go, right, I'm off duty. Not now. Talk to me about it in the morning. But you're right, that, you know, how much of our identity is wrapped up as self-employed individuals or business owners? How much of that is really interesting? What are the things that most people don't talk about when it comes to business owners and independent professionals specifically? What challenges in the work that you're doing with clients come up time and time again?
Almost certainly this whole business about should I retire or should I keep going? And you know, I think if you're in the corporate world, that's fine. You probably get to a specific point, whether it's 60 or 65 or whatever, and then you are invited if you want to retire. But when you're an independent professional, then it becomes much more of a difficult decision to make, and it depends also on so many other factors. Going back to money, that key question: do I have enough money to retire on? You know, so you've got to do that. But also, if you keep working, the older you get, the more, I won't say difficult, but you know, it's never quite as easy as it was when you're young to keep going. And so things like your health begin to be much more to the fore. And I certainly believe that of the three things that really matter to people are health, their relationships, particularly with their spouse and their family, and their work, and the financial side of work. And each of these tend to be connected. You know, if work is going well and you're earning good money, then the money side of things and your home life tends to be much easier. So they all interlink. Absolutely. And you can't just ignore one without dealing with the other.
Yeah, love that. Now I know that in your work, Jeremy, you talk about living a life full of abundance and meaning. And I love that phrase, by the way. So when I'm doing my research and I'm taking a look at your website and going, right, what are the areas that I'd really love to dig a bit deeper about? Help me understand what a life of abundance and meaning practically means when you talk about it. And what are the steps that we can take if we're not there yet, to get closer to that life of abundance and meaning.
Yeah, you talked about meaning just now when we were talking about the kids, and I bringing up the kids is has a huge impact on your meaning, and for as a parent, bringing up the kids is something that means something really quite powerful. But I think when as the kids leave home, you and end up trying to think out what does life mean for me? What's important in life? And my view, and is my personal view, is that you get meaning in your life by making a difference to other people.
Yeah.
And that's why I believe really quite firmly that and it was one reason I go out to Lourdes. I'm going out to Lourdes, as I said, later on this week, and I have been a number of times. But you get real meaning out of that because you are in the process. You are there to help other people, and it doesn't matter about yourself. Well, it does actually, because you were encouraged to look after ourselves whilst we're there and not get too tired, etc. But your emphasis is your real emphasis is looking after other people, and in a way that you wouldn't normally do. But I do feel that you get meaning from life by helping others, and that's quite crucial. And then you come on to abundance, a life of abundance and meaning. And abundance is people that, well, once again, they get a bit upset when I tell them actually you need, it's not about earning more money and spending more money. It's about doing exactly the opposite. It's about doing less, earning less, spending less. The opposite of abundance is scarcity.
Yeah.
And you find yourself you're in an arena of scarcity when you keep saying, I haven't got enough time, I haven't got enough money, all those sort of things. I haven't got enough. That's when you know you're in an area of scarcity. So what you're trying to do is bring it back to I have enough and I am enough.
Yeah.
And so I go back to money because actually money, as I say, is money does make the world go round, and you have to address your money, your financial dealings, not just doing the spreadsheet work, which or I say spreadsheet work, it's that physical bit about looking after the pound, shillings and pence, but you also have to understand your relationship with money and
100%.
what money means to you.
Yeah.
And I think that's once you work on that, then it makes it much easier to live a life of abundance.
Yeah.
Uh,
It's so interesting that, because I've learned a lot about that subject from interviewing people like George, but
oh yeah,
also that element of we had Catherine Morgan, who talks about the stories that we tell ourselves about money about 3 or 4 months ago. And what's interesting about that is there was no talk. She's a financial planner, but we literally for an hour and 10 minutes, we never talked about spreadsheets. We just
yeah,
talked about the stories we tell ourselves about money, where
yeah,
they come from, and whether they enable us or disempower us. And it was a fascinating conversation.
yeah. Oh,
Because
I think when you start asking people about their relationship with money, it brings out all sorts of things. And in fact, I run a sort of it's, if you want, an exploratory meeting. I just call it my map maker meeting, and I ask people just 3 questions during that hour, and I listen to their answers. And I start off by talking about why are you here? I just ask them why you're here, and quite often they say, well, my pension isn't working or whatever. I just need advice on this. But then you start, but that changes. So I have this feeling that the initial what people present with initially is not what they rarely want to talk about. But then I asked them the second question, which is, what does money mean to you? What's your relationship with money? And quite often there's a sort of bit of a stunned silence because most of the time people do not actually think about what their relationship with money is. And then they start talking, and it's very, very interesting because it brings up far more than just asking them why they're here. And you get some very, very interesting answers. And I remember an absolute classic. I was talking to a couple, and I asked them that very question: what does money mean to you? And they went off on all sorts of different areas. And the woman, the wife, was actually she suddenly went very quiet and stayed quiet for 2 or 3 minutes, and then suddenly she said, "I wish I was a better wife, mother, and daughter," and burst into tears. And that all stemmed from this question: what does money mean to you? What's your relationship with money? And so it's a very it's, and I still use that question, although I'm trying to not so much disassociate myself from money, but myself with money, but make it less of make everything else more equal to it, if you want. But I still ask that question because it is so revealing. It is so revealing.
I mean, I've had experiences in my career working with clients where that's happened, and it isn't a very insightful question. But you know what's really interesting, Jeremy? That feeling of abundance, and from the way you describe it, and the way that we're talking about, and my understanding of it, that's an internal game. It's about us and our thoughts and feelings as opposed to the outside world. How
Yeah, yeah.
much of feeling abundant is about the way we view the world and the stories we tell ourselves. And clearly there's an element of, if you've got nothing, you're not going to feel abundant. But how much of it is about gratitude, appreciating what we've got, and knowing that we've got enough for ourselves? What are your thoughts around that? How much of it is an insight game, and how much of it is about what we've actually got?
Yeah, I see where you're coming from on that one. And I do actually, I do go back to the spreadsheet. I do a rough lifetime cash flow with people
Yeah,
so they can see how what.
it is good, right?
Yeah, it is. It is
I,
good,
but
but
what's
also,
interesting is I've provided people with clarity, and their story doesn't link with the facts. Do you know what I mean?
yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's a very interesting one. I think one of my mantras again is that money is a mirror of the soul. You quite often when you ask people about money and their feelings about money, um, it doesn't gel with what they've already told you about
Yeah,
why they're here. And so going back to your question about the internal side of abundance and the external side of abundance, yeah, I think money is an external factor, and whether you have enough or not is very much a sort of spreadsheet issue. But the abundance side is the internal side, is what you actually feel about money and your relationship with money.
yeah, but also how you feel about your contribution to a bunch of stuff, right? As you said, your lady was like, I didn't build my family relationships. I felt I failed in those roles, and that's all internal. One thing I really love that you talk about is the need for many of us to have a little bit more courage, a little bit more perseverance, and a little bit more faith. Now, I'm lacking in all those areas, so I'm really going to benefit from asking this question. But tell me a bit about what we need to consider when we're thinking about courage, perseverance, and faith, and
Yeah.
how they actually apply to improving our lives.
Yeah, I think I'm coming here from I think we spend a lot of time, particularly as coaches and financial advisors, financial planners, we spend a lot of time dealing with what's wrong and trying to fix what's wrong. And that's okay. It will take you up to if you want a sort of neutral position. but fixing what's wrong doesn't necessarily mean that you're improving your well-being.
Yes.
So to improve your well-being, I think is that's where those three qualities come in. So courage, uh, we all have courage in us. Actually, you say you don't have courage, but one of the issues is we never actually know what courage we have until a situation arises, and so I talked recently, I think, about how people in the Second World War in occupied France rarely found courage to resist in a way that they would never ever have known. But going to the more to the present day, I think you just having the courage to understand your mistakes and to recognize that you have made mistakes is really important.
Yeah.
Um, and we all have it in us. Maybe you need a bit of a push to make you do it. But that courage, we all have courage in us, and we have courage every doing things every day. I mean, even going out to the shops when you know you're on a budget. That takes a bit of a courage to actually turn around and say, "No, I'm not buying that," or whatever. You know,
Yeah.
it's and perseverance. Um, I think it's all too easy these days to turn around and say, "Oh, I give up. Someone else can do it, or it can wait, or whatever." But I think perseverance is really important, and just in business terms, it's really important to persevere to overcome the challenges of a particular work project, and all those sort of classic things like break down the task into smaller bits, set sub goals, reward yourself, get feedback from others about what you're doing. All those things help you to persevere and to help get things done. And those also apply to home as well. And I have a saying: you should actually take your work home. Everyone says don't take your work home, but actually take your work home, because in your work you actually develop systems and processes which you can adapt to home.
I think the interesting thing about that is some of the skills that you might pick up at work,
Yeah,
particularly for me, the curiosity, the relationship building skills, all of the elements that make me a fairly good financial planner. Hopefully, I can use those skills at home too to
yeah,
improve the relationships with my family. The interesting thing is remembering to use it at home is the solution. I mean, that's an
yeah,
entirely different conversation. But I think you're right. I think the skills that we learn in certain aspects of our lives, including courage in a certain area of our lives, are transferable.
very much so. Very much so. And actually, it goes back to what I was talking about earlier on, this sort of what I call the liminal space between work and home. Quite a lot of what you learn at work, you can apply at home, and vice
Vice
versa.
versa. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So I know.
And you, as an independent, of course, you make up your own rules, make up your own processes, and everything else.
Yeah, I mean that's a
Um,
double-edged sword often, right? Because you've got the freedom, but you've also got the paradox of choice, because
oh
you can
gosh,
do anything.
absolutely,
So
absolutely,
yes,
absolutely.
it's an
Yeah.
interesting one. And I know you love helping independent professionals, and that's who you focus on helping. Tell me why you love helping people like that, and the other we've spoken a little bit about the unique challenges they face, but anything else that makes them unique in terms of who you're aiming to help?
I think this stems from way back when I suppose as you know, as a financial planner, we were just all desperate for clients, and I picked up any old client I could find, including I picked up a couple of people working in the corporate arena, and they weren't successful. Our relationship as a client was not successful, and eventually they left. Usually on pretty good terms, I have to say, but they were never able to fully gain, if you want, or benefit from the advice and help that I could give. because I think they had that sort of that support, if you want, from their corporate environments, their corporate employers. So to a certain extent, it was the other way around. It wasn't that I saw then people in the independent people as being a specific target, but I did find out, I did realize that the other side, if you want, were not the most appropriate clients I had.
Yeah.
But as time went on, and I got to know these sort of independent professionals much more, much better, I began to realize that they had these unique challenges, and especially the older ones, people whose kids had left home. I hate using that expression because, it reminds everyone of the empty nest and the empty nest syndrome, and which is just tends to be a sort of passing trait, passing phase. But I think when the kids leave home, it does. It's more the second half of your life, and those are really interesting challenges. And I've
Mm.
mentioned some of them already. Should I retire? Should I downsize? What about my relationship with my spouse and my children, and my friends, my community? What about my leisure time? How do I spend hopefully a little bit more time? What do I need to do with that? Um, yeah, another great one, not a great one, but a really interesting challenge that people come up with is my elderly parents. So often these days, your parents probably live some distance away. They're getting on a bit, and they're beginning to, if you want, not have that sort of sense of independence they used to
Yeah.
have.
Yeah.
And whereas probably your parents have actually done, an awful lot for you in looking after your children, now suddenly you get to the stage where you have to look after them, and that's often a really difficult thing. And how do I do that? So it involves your relationship with your own parents, and quite often you find that if you tell them what to do, they will say, "No, I'm not doing
Yeah.
that." And you have this sort of classic, well, why don't you move up here next to me? Don't want to do that. Don't want to do that.
Yeah.
But also money, time, all these sort of issues.
We did a video a couple of weeks ago now on what happens next, talking about the unique challenges people in this generation face. Because I think if you look at the images that are normally portrayed by retirement, it's just two people sitting on a beach, sunset, overlooking the sea. And my experience, and I imagine your experience as well, working with clients, is challenges we face don't go away as soon as we retire; they just evolve. And
Yeah,
the being part of that sandwich generation for a lot of my clients is, and managing the changing dynamic on both sides of the relationship, like with mum and
yeah,
dad and with the kids,
yeah.
isn't an easy journey. It's something we need to think about how we're doing and adapt to. One thing I'm really curious about is because you're 70 now, is that right?
I am indeed. Yep, yep.
And work still plays an integral part in your life. It's your relationship with it has changed over time. I wonder whether our traditional perception of how work fits into our life has evolved, and whether retirement for an independent professional, it depends on what they're aiming to achieve in their life. I completely get that. But conventional retirement to stopping doing anything is actually not always the right direction. What do you think?
No, no. Oh, I entirely agree. I think when I've seen two is shortly after COVID, and there are quite a lot of reports in the papers and the press about a number of people who were retiring at age 50. And I thought, this is absolutely crazy. I mean, you retire at 50. A, you don't know how expensive retirement is. B, you're going to be bored
Yeah,
within 2 years. I mean, there's only so many times you can go around the golf course.
yeah,
And
true.
and and C, I reckon that within 2 3 years, these guys will be wanting to get back into work somehow or other.
Yeah.
And um, I think work is actually a privilege. It is and I certainly see working with clients as being a huge privilege, and without being sort of being proud of it, I feel that I've got quite a lot of experience behind me, both financial and other experience, and I'm think it's a privilege to be able to pass on that experience to others, and to help them do others.
Yeah.
So I would not want to stop working until I really can't
Yeah.
work anymore,
Yeah.
if you want.
You know
Um,
what, I think it comes back for me as well, by the way, and my relationship with work's going to evolve over the years, I'm sure, as your one does. But it always, for me, comes back to something you said earlier, which is the ability to serve others. Because I
yeah,
think actually work is an integral part of that journey, isn't it? You know, if you're
yeah, yeah,
helping others
yeah,
do what they
yeah,
need to,
yeah,
I think that's really interesting.
yeah. And I think you can serve others in a number of different ways. I mean, it doesn't have to be philanthropic or charitable, although I think a lot of people will
Yeah,
are doing that.
and that
I
might be
mean,
part of it.
yeah, but also I think you can do it from a commercial point of view as well.
True.
You can actually provide a service which people are happy to pay for, um, as well as doing, you know, a bit of voluntary work here and there. And just from my point of view, I spend quite a lot of my time at work helping others, doing coaching work, but at the same time, I'm also I help to run our little village newsletter and website, which is all on
Voluntary basis.
yeah, you don't get paid for it or anything, but you just do it, and it's helping others, and that's,
You,
you
you,
know, gives you a sense of meaning, a sense of
well,
purpose
it's
in
so
life.
it's so interesting. I try and raise money for charity every year. I'm doing Kilimanjaro this year, which would be really
Yeah,
exciting.
you said,
But
yeah, yeah.
then the other thing that's interesting for me is I've taken on this job of running my little paddle tennis community of 35 of us, and we set up a spreadsheet, and we've got polls and WhatsApp, and we set up
All right,
games.
yeah.
And they're jobs that I delegate in my day-to-day professional life that I'm happy to take on because it's a social thing. And it's
Yeah,
a
yeah,
strange mixture because I actually enjoy getting people together to have a game of paddle and have a chat and have a laugh, and it fits in with that social need of
yeah,
wanting to connect people. It's a really interesting one. One thing I want to talk a little bit about, and you mentioned it earlier, Jeremy, is the map maker service. Like you define it. So what does that look like, and what's the journey that people go through when they work with you to build their map?
yeah. I think it's really just a variation on something I started off many years ago. And when I was a financial planner, I suddenly realized that actually this whole concept of doing a free exploration meeting was not particularly good news. And in fact, you know, you went off to your dentist, to a new dentist, and they charged you whatever 90 or so quid for an to come up with a review of your dental work, or your opticians, or whatever. Everyone was charging. So I actually started. I turned my exploration meeting into just, well, come along and let's have a chat, to a very specific product, and I made a charge for that product, whether or not people decided to go ahead and become a full client or not. But I also I think started to uh, use some of my coaching skills, and a lot of this came from George Kinder's teaching. And I think I started to, I launched my map maker about the same time as I started working with George Kinder. And the concept behind map maker is just to help people understand themselves a bit more. So it's just three questions. The whole thing lasts for about an hour. Um, but I let people talk, and I only ask questions ready to clarify something or to encourage people. But So I started by asking people why they're here, always very interesting one. And I asked them about what their approach to money is, and then finally asked them, if you'd work with me, what sort of what would life look like? What do you want from me? What do you want from our relationship? And then you talk a little bit about what you do, and then let them just carry on and make their own decision. And I began to find, even though people were paying money for this, I was charging people. In fact, maybe because I was charging people for this, people saw the real value in what I was doing and the questions questions I was asking. And I suppose I had a conversion rate of about 80%.
Yeah,
Uh,
interesting.
really good news. And I
Yeah,
always remember one couple came in to see me and they to do the map maker meeting, and we went a bit over. We overran a bit, and it was about an hour and a half. And by the time they finished, it was about 12:30. And this is why I'm in Helmsley now. And they said, right, we're just going off. We're going to go and find lunch somewhere in Helmsley, and they did. And about 2:15, the telephone rang, and they said, we've discussed it over lunch. Yep, we'd like to pick up a client. But I think it's about helping people to understand where they are, but it's also about helping me to build a relationship with clients,
sure.
and to make clients realize that they are really being understood and looked
Yeah,
after.
yeah.
And I think that's really important.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one, that, because I think for me, the element that's really important, and one of my clients put it bets quite recently. She said, "You give me an environment of psychological safety to have these conversations."
Yeah, yeah,
It's probably something I take for granted, but just giving people the space to think and the opportunity to share that, and then giving professional advice and helping people take practical action is great. But the starting point, I think, comes from building that listening relationship of
yeah,
trust. It's
yeah.
really
I
interesting.
think even before that, it's what I call the secure area, the secure
Yeah,
having a secure area. So that's not just about making sure that the doors are shut and people outside can't hear and all the rest of it, but it's about letting people know exactly what's going on, having an agenda, explaining your confidentiality clauses, your all those sort of stuff. Making sure people are comfortable when they come in.
yeah.
It's
It's the
building
environment
a
to
secure
create.
arena
Yeah,
that is really important. And
yeah,
um, yeah, it is actually very important. I've seen it when it doesn't happen, and it's quite worrying, quite concerning.
yeah. Interesting. Now, you've been through your own what happens next journey a few times. What have you learned from the experience of that evolution of you and the evolution of your life and work? What insights did you get from living it?
I think evolution is the right word. I've never been particularly conventional in my work. Uh, but what I would come away with, and once again, it may sound trite, but change is constant. Every, change. You do not know what's going to happen tomorrow.
Yeah,
I always remember I was on a ski lift. This is some time ago on a ski lift in Italy. It was New Year's Day in Italy, and we'd been partying the night before, so I was a bit hungover, but I was determined. It was our last day of skiing. I was determined to have a really good day's skiing. And I got up on I was one of the first people on the lifts up the mountain, and it was beautifully quiet. The sun was shining. It was a classic sort of alpine day. Sun was shining. The skies were blue. It was absolutely beautiful. There was no one else on the lift at all. And I suddenly had this almost sort of revelation. It was a sort of bit of a Damascene moment. And I thought, I'm going to go back home, sell my flat, give up my job, do the whole lot, and just go and do my own thing. And I did. And it was tough,
through
but
that
actually,
phase.
it was a good thing to have done.
Yeah,
So, what happens next? I think, well, two things. It can either happen very suddenly, um, or else it's something that you think about and you plan for. But I think also having a plan is actually really important. Um, and as financial planners and life planners, you'll recognize this. But I think it really is important to have a plan, have an objective, have a goal, and not only have a plan, but have a plan B as well. Because if plan A doesn't work, you
But
know.
I like I love that. I think planning is important, but I, I, I think the most direct quote about planning is from Mike Tyson. Planning's great until you get punched in the face. So like have the
Yeah, yeah,
plan, but
yeah,
actually know that the plan might go wrong, the plan might change, the plan might evolve.
yeah.
And like any great plan, you just replan, don't you? You just it's what you said. It's the evolution of a plan and the evolution of a life that changes over time.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So yeah, well, change has been a constant in my life, and I've
Yeah.
sort of recognized that now. And you never know when the next sort of bombshell is going to hit, or when the good things are going to hit, for that matter.
Even when you get a great idea on a ski lift, and it's yeah,
Yeah.
I think the interest, and I've had this in my life, and you've had sometimes those bombshells are you, aren't they?
Oh
Sometimes they're
yeah.
like, right, I'm changing everything. I'm getting, you know, I remember when I started Savello, and I went home, I had a corporate job, and I went home and said to Cassie, I'm starting a business. And she went, you do realise we've got a 6-year-old and a mortgage. You must be out of your mind. I went up to Charlotte, who was upstairs, and said, "Oh, Dad's leaving his job and starting a business." And Jeremy, she burst into tears. And I went, "Oh, darling, what have I done to upset you?" She went, "Dad, who's going to pay for the holidays now?" And that was the only thing she was worried about. But the
Yeah.
interesting thing is, it took an element of bravery for me to turn around and go, right, this isn't working. I'm making a big change. And
Yeah.
looking 15 years back, as you said, it's one of the best decisions I ever made because
Yeah.
but you need to sometimes step into that change to allow you to do it. I want to talk stories because I think stories really encapsulate the work we do well. So, what story best describes the work you do today?
So in terms of clients, you mean client
Yeah,
type store? Yeah.
yeah,
I think I've always told a wonderful story of a couple who came to see me. They did not really know where they stood, and in fact, that was a lesson I've learned that lesson as well. One of the first things I do with people is to help them work out where they stand now. But so we talked for quite some time, and I got them to work out where they stood, and particularly financially where they stood. Um, and eventually, I came up with a rough sum of what they were worth, and they were rather shocked by this. Not only that, but they then turned around and said, "Oh, didn't realise that." Well, I'm going to give up my job straight away. He actually was he worked in the sort of healthcare sector, so he said I'm going to give up my job as soon as I can hand over everything. So it took him some time, or it took him about 6 months or so. And she was an editor of a legal magazine, and she said, "Well, I'm going to keep going for another year or so because I'm need to I've got to do this." But then she too uh, changed her whole life, and actually they then moved from York down to London to be near their children and to be part of the cultural scene of London. And the whole thing happened in a very short space of time. um, and they, it was at the end of one of the meetings, they just turned around and said, "Oh, in that case, we'll just do this." And
yeah.
I was a bit sort of, oh gosh, I haven't even done the hard work, the donkey work, the detailed work yet. And off they went and did it. But it worked out very, very well for them. And I kept
Love
in
that.
touch with them for a long, long time.
Love
And
that.
I used to go down and see them in London. And yeah, no, it was great.
Amazing. And I love the fact that I'm not alone in turning around when people go, I'm going to make this decision. You turn around and go, do you want to give it a week? I'm glad I'm not the only one that does that.
It's amazing how some people do make very fast decisions on not a lot of information.
Well, I think the learning journey that I'm going on at the minute is to get better at doing that, actually, because there's a really good book that we talk about quite a lot on What Happens Next called Designing Your Life, which talks about the speed you make decisions and the fact that most decisions in life, not every, but most decisions in life are ultimately reversible anyway. And it's that element. I suppose it's the ones that you can't reverse and that you need to give a bit more thought to. But the concept of incremental, low risk experimentation in our lives, just doing stuff because we can give it a go and it's not going to cost us too much, is probably one I really like and share a lot on What Happens Next. Jeremy, I've loved today, mate. Thank you so much for coming on.
It's been a really good conversation, Chris. I loved it. It's been really good. I just love talking about these sort of things.
Same here. And I always learn a lot. So thank you for sharing so openly. Where can people find out a bit more about you?
Probably my website is just jeremydeeds.com, all one word, jeremydeeds.com.
Perfect.
Yeah. I'm also on LinkedIn. The link is there on the website.
We'll put all your links in the comments below when we publish it as well. Brilliant. Thanks, Jeremy. Have a lovely day.
And you too, Chris.